Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma. Joining me here on this lovely off-season day in the middle of the NFL wasteland of news, and what, Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, what's going on, my friend?
I used Unstoppables. I can't stop.
Okay, well, that's I don't know if you kind of look like that that meme, that little gif that goes around with Shaq. When he does like he's got like starts like doing that little wiggle.
I don't know. It's like, so we've been streaming something on Hulu of late, and the commercials are the same commercials every time because I'm cheap and I'm not paying for commercial-free Hulu. And like I get to watch Jalen Hurts say he's going to Disneyland 1,000 times a night, and then I get the commercial for Unstoppables, where the guy's like, here, wear your dirty shirt. I used Unstoppables so it don't stink. And then she just starts going, ooh, I'm going to feel this at work today. Ooh, I'm feeling it going through security. Ooh. And then there's people on the airplane doing it. And I was like, we actually use Unstoppables, and I never do that.
Well, maybe I use the all free and clear so I don't have those problems, right? So you don't get like the skin irritations and the rashes from the supposedly the chemical free, whatever. All of it's chemicals at some point. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
one of the big buzzwords out there in recent years is like microplastics. And it's like, oh, dear Lord. I like the way I grew up in the 80s. My body's probably full. I'm going to turn into a microplastic. I'm going to turn into Stretch Armstrong before you know it. But,
There you go.
man, I'll tell you what, we're stretching today. This is like, that period before free agency hits in about a month. I was looking back on last year's news. Mitch Trubisky got released like right around Valentine's Day. Heartbreaker for him, right? And the Steelers, they didn't have Mason Rudolph under contract. There was all the speculation that Kenny Pickett quit on the team. And I was looking back on all these things, and then I'm like, what the hell has changed now this year? The three quarterbacks the Steelers had this year, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Kyle Allen, none of them are under contract. So every time a quarterback somewhere in the NFL, doesn't matter where, and I'm going to look everywhere. We're going to uncover every rock. We're going to look in every nook. We're going to spy every cranny.
Wait.
Yeah,
This just
we're going
came over
everywhere.
the wire.
Oh,
This just
no.
came over the wire. Josh Allen farted near the owner, and now he's up for trade.
Oh, oh my goodness. The Bills were one of the teams. Like, I was literally going to go down every team. That's how ridiculous this has gotten. But I'm bumping once again. I know everybody's very much looking forward to talking about defense that probably won't have very many changes to it. So we keep bumping the topic. There's not a whole lot to talk about defense. Honestly, most of the starters are going to be back. They're not going to trade TJ Watt. But the more ridiculous things that have come out, and for those of you that are out there, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, here on YouTube with the shorts, if you're watching our video version of the podcast, putting out some short stuff real quick, because like the longer form podcasts, we're going to probably be doing about once a week unless there's breaking news. But goodness, man, there was one at the end of the week, right around Valentine's Day. Steelers called about Trevor Lawrence, and then the Jaguars denied it. And I'm like, who on earth are they calling? Shad Khan haven't even hired a GM yet. They have a head coach in place, but not a GM. What, like, I understand there's only 32 of these jobs. It may be your childhood dream, but sometimes it's like the place and the time and the opportunity and whether or not you should take it. The Jaguars is not a place that I personally, if I were in the hunt for work in the NFL, that I'm looking for a long-term career prospect, so to speak. That is a
What are
team.
you talking about? Trevor Lawrence says they're going to win a Super Bowl in like a couple years. It's all good. Jacksonville's the place to be, man. Hey.
Okay, so
Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence came up just really, really quick, really brief in our previous show. We just like glossed over real quick, and all of a sudden it was
because it was dumb.
It was dumb. No, he signed a new contract, but the base salaries, like whatever team takes that on, like the base salaries are really low. Jacksonville would have to be really dumb, and you have an owner that's doing dumb things, fired a GM and hired a head coach without a GM, and they still, as of this date, what are we, like, went on a Wednesday? They still do, Wednesday, February 19th. So when this show drops, you'll see the date, somewhere below or wherever you're listening or watching from. They still haven't, I haven't seen a GM hired. They had their list, their finalists, but who does Omar Khan call? Does he call the other Khan? Con, like, there's too much conning going on. But I would take Trevor Lawrence, and the contract isn't like terrible. Let Jacksonville do all that stupid stuff. Again, it's like when you trade, what are you giving up in it? This is a guy that's a top overall pick this is a guy you could make a legitimate argument for. Some of these other guys, not so much. They're former first-round picks, and you're like, bad situation, but also bad player. This guy never lost a game until he came to the pros. Then he had Urban Meyer as a head coach. Like, he's been dealt a really bad hand. Now, if the Steelers really did call, if Omar Khan really did call on this, or he was doing his diligence, or however this leaked, because it's just nothing but a rumor, could be agents putting something out there too. Maybe Trevor isn't happy being in Jacksonville. You never know. Maybe the Steelers are trying to shake the trees. This is the month of liars. This whole offseason, because you go in to free agency, nobody wants to show their cards. Then it's like, aha, now we're dealing new hands. Then it's a draft, and everybody's going to lie about that too. But good on them if they did check, because that could be a viable long-term solution, at least for 2, 3, 4 years, you would think, before you honestly know if Trevor Lawrence just isn't good. But his ceiling is, I believe, just so much higher than a lot of the other players we're going to talk about. It's like good if they did call, but this reeks of bullshit.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's just, I said it last time around. It is the season of lies. It is the season of deceit. It is the season where anybody can say anything for any reason, and somebody will pick it up. Adam Schefter could be walking by, a homeless guy, and he goes, Trevor Lawrence to Steelers. And he's like, I heard it.
Source. Trust me, bro.
Yeah, a source on the street. There you go. Source on the street.
Yeah, that's definitely a street source. Well, the other one that dropped, okay, so right before that, I was like I was queuing up. I was actually recording, and I was talking about Aaron Rodgers, because we kind of smoked that fool on the last show just a little bit, but I had to revisit. And it's like he's the odds-on favorite, and it was like DraftKings Sportsbook putting this out. So you got to understand, not only in the age of liars and speculation, this is all meant to do certain things. There's nothing going on in the NFL right now. Right? Nothing. And nothing can go on unless somebody's an unrestricted free agent, of which these contracts don't expire until March, whatever. Let me get the actual date here in a minute. But it's still like a month away, right? Before anybody can talk to anybody, unless it's their own players. They could re-sign their own players. So if the Steelers want to bring back Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, so be it. And I'm really trying not to talk too much about those two, because that'll naturally come as we talk about some of these other players, right? So Aaron Rodgers. Would you believe in a million years that Aaron Rodgers, not only is he going to play in the NFL this upcoming year, and if that's a yes, the Jets still have to release him. Apparently, there are the rumors out there that they've informed him that he will not be there.
June 1st, yeah.
Yeah, one of those post whatever cuts, but they got to cut him, and then will they wait until his just free agency, or will they hold it close to the vest before they have to take on some of these bonuses and payouts and cap charges? And maybe they get some sucker to trade like a 6th or 7th round pick that team probably desperately needs. You thought that they were very talented coming into last year. The way they performed did not, reflect that. But Aaron Rodgers, at 42 years of age, who can't move, who is a statue. Somebody said, oh, he put up better numbers than Russell Wilson. I was like, did he though? Like, if you take Wilson over the full year, he does better than, Aaron Rodgers does. Aaron Rodgers had like Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson, and he had a better offensive line, and he should have had a better coordinator, and he had Breece Hall and all this other stuff. He had better support around him and didn't do anything. There ain't no way I'm taking Aaron. And whatever money he's going to want, he could end up in a similar situation though as the Russell Wilson thing last year, where Denver owed Wilson all that money, right? And maybe Woody Johnson and the Jets, maybe some of that money's still on the books and Rodgers isn't as expensive. I don't care. I still don't want him. He's going to go to some dark cave, and he's going to, worship Xenu or something with candles and then arrive at a decision as to whether or not he's going to play in week 6. Like, the guy is just, he's so far out there anymore. He reminds me of like Tom Cruise or something in Hollywood. I wouldn't touch him with a 40-foot stick for all the trouble that he brings. And he's not going to upgrade the position at all. And he's not a long-term solution. And he could be expensive. No, he's off the books.
I'm just going to say what I have said about Aaron Rodgers for how many ever years. Mr. Overrated. I don't care. He doesn't win it. He won one Super Bowl. He doesn't win anything. Screw him. I don't want him. And now he's washed up. Oh, Mr. Overrated. So he's not even good Mr. Overrated. He's bad Mr. Overrated.
Yeah.
No, I'm out. There is no, in my mind, there is no universe where a synergy of Mike Tomlin and Aaron Rodgers actually works. I think Mike Tomlin would, what's the term that I can use safely? Something slap him silly. And I just can't, I don't see it. I'm like, no, I'm out.
I mean, he took 40 sacks over 17 games. It's not really terrible.
Look, if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I'm done with this crap. I'm old. I got all kinds of money. I don't need to do jack. I can go be on the what's his face, the punter guy. I can't remember his name. I never watched the damn show, so I can't remember his name.
Pat McAfee.
You know, Pat McAfee, the punter guy.
The punter guy.
Pat McAfee.
I had to reach for that because Pat McAfee to me now is like, he's in WWE. He's all over the place. College Game Day and everything else. I'm like, punter guy. That's 3 generations ago for Pat McAfee.
That's what he was when he was playing punter guy. So you know, he can go be on Pat McAfee and do his guest spots, and he can try and pretend he's still one of the cool kids. He's not. He's old, and that's coming from someone old.
I was trying to pull up some Rodgers stats here just because somebody out there will be like, no, you're crazy. And I'm like, no, I'm not crazy. He threw 584 pass attempts, 63% completed, almost 3,900 yards, 28 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. That's not a whole lot of production from ye old Aaron Rodgers. In fact, how many games did he have? He had 6 games where he didn't even throw for 200 yards. He had 3 games where he didn't throw a touchdown at all this season. He did appear in every game. So, I mean, it was at least, semi-healthy. He had several games. Let me see, about half of them, doing the maths with Joe here, but trying to do it abbreviated. So I don't count out loud like Sesame Street, like, 1 game. I mean, Denver got to him 5 times in September. Buffalo got to him 4. He had multiple games where he took 3 sacks. Sometimes those aren't like necessarily the worst numbers in the world. He fumbled 5 times during the season, lost 2 of them. He doesn't really run. He's immobile. And age-wise, okay, I called him 42. I'm sorry. He's actually 41. He'll be 42 on December 2nd. So I accelerated his age. But how many dudes north of 40?
He's the oldest 41-year-old you've ever met.
Got to be like one of the oldest guys. Is there somebody older than him in the NFL right now? I don't think there. I mean, I'd have to reach. Is there a kicker or somebody that's older?
Put his face on the screen in standard view and look at him and put him next to somebody who's 65 or 63 or 62 even. Some really attractive 62-year-old human being. And you'll go, which one of these guys is older? And the answer is, it's Aaron Rodgers. The miles have worn him. He's worn.
Just so you know, folks, Brian's talking about himself here but Aaron, he does. Thank
you for recognizing that I'm an incredibly attractive 62-year-old man.
I've got the salt and pepper here has been coming in for years. I think I had this in my late 30s already. Like,
Same.
The male pattern baldness and everything like that. Genetics. Thanks, Dad. So, oh well. You live with it. You age gracefully. I know I'm not going to play quarterback for anybody next year. We'll put it that way. But Aaron Rodgers. So it's like you got all this speculation. There's another one that maybe fall out of your chair when it's even mentioned. Please don't hurt yourself on this one, Brian. Let's just bring up the slide.
Oh, good God,
Daniel Jones. No, he is now linked to the Steelers are interested. I know that he got cut from the Giants and Who did he even play for at the end of the year last year? I don't even remember.
The Packers, wasn't
the
he
Vikings.
On the third
he was on the
string
Vikings.
Vikings, yeah.
That's right.
Somebody in the NFC North, yeah.
Yeah, because oh man, I'll tell you what. I had to backtrack, go look at this. Everybody was calling him Danny Dimes. And I'm like, do I have this wrong? Did, the Daniel Jones, could he be a fit for the Steelers? And I started to look at numbers. I know sometimes I get too deep in the stats. It's like, you got to have these intangibles. But you take a look at what he did, and it's like, okay, he had a year here where he's never really thrown for a lot. His first season, he had 24 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. Hasn't really played. Like 2023, missed a lot of games. Last year, he was cut loose early. He had 2,070 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. The previous year, he only had 909 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. The previous year, though, 3,205 yards, 67% completion percentage, 15 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. But wait, man, he's got this other intangible. That same year, he ran for 708 yards and 7 touchdowns. So he could run the football too, Brian. That sounds an awful lot like we're making the same arguments for. Justin Fields. That's who it sounds like. I mean, and Justin Fields, to me, he has fewer starts. So, Danny Dimes here has 69. Nice. 69 starts in the NFL. So he's got like about 25.
The number he ends on too.
Yeah, pretty much, right?
Sweet.
So he's got 25 more starts than Justin Fields. If I'm going to give anybody a shadow of a doubt as to whether or not they're going to break through that ceiling, change the scenery can help anybody. He had Brian Daboll. He had Saquon at one point. They fumbled that too. There's a lot of good arguments there for bad. The Giants have been like just bad perpetually for the last decade for being such a storied franchise. I feel bad for them. But how do they dig out of that? I'm hoping that the Steelers don't end up in the same rut. And I feel like that they're already there, Brian, because we take a look around. It's just the names we're already saying. We're like, reject. No, not going to happen. And we'll look at potential people in the draft too. And we're going to be talking about this till the cows come home, because you have now arrived at mid-90s, early 2000s Pittsburgh Steelers, a decade of Mike Tomlin. Hey, he looked good for the other team, for our opponent. He beat our butt. He'll be good for us.
Mark Malone looked good for a year.
Mark Malone got to the AFC title game. Yeah,
he looked good for a year.
So if Mark Malone 047359662 jumps in the comments again, we're building up your boy there.
Is that really? Did you have his number?
No, I don't know. It's like some troll.
I was gonna be impressed as hell, man. I was gonna be like, wow, you got that number down. I miss Mark Malone 9785430 or whatever his number is. I haven't been called a ball licker in a couple weeks, so hey.
Well, I don't think there's anybody that we're going to be ball licking on this list necessarily. I think still we're going to find out as we come back around that the best choice is to bring one of the two back, Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, because we are on that point in the ride. We are at let's find Tommy Maddox, the XFL MVP for the only season that league operated in like 2000 or 2001. Let's draft Cordell Stewart out of Colorado, and Cordell ahead of his time, and maybe in a different era. It was the big games with Cordell, right? Cordell,
yep.
Just the big games with the turnovers. It does sound familiar, doesn't it? Sounds familiar as of late, and it's somebody we idolize. It's going in the Hall of Fame too, but also it sounds familiar from He Who Shall Not Be Named. Name begins with, his initials are ND, and it's not Notre Dame, or NO, I should say, as in no, we don't want him.
As in no, let's not talk about him.
No, let's not talk about him. And Kent Graham, high-priced free. Remember back then, it was like 3 years, $15 million, something like that. And it's like, wow, that was like a large quarterback contract for the time. And yeah, that didn't happen either. They gave Neil a lot of money too back then. He was making double Rod Woodson, which is just insane when you think about it. But
he was making good money and then left for even better money.
That's where we're at. I mean, who knows where Charlie Batch gets picked up? You never know if Charlie Batch was thought of as another reclamation project, a guy that was highly drafted. I think second rounder, but he was a top 50, I believe, if I recall. 4-year starter in Detroit, and kind of just like a 500 ball kind of guy. And that's, we we take a look at some of the guys in the draft, especially the ones that are going to be available to the Steelers, I don't expect a higher ceiling than Mason Rudolph. I expect probably more like a Landry Jones by the time you get some of these guys, because Shedeur Sanders, you look at the teams who have needs, they're at the top of the draft. Yeah, will the Browns do something? They move on from Deshaun Watson with pick 2. You got the Raiders are in there, the Giants are in there, right? A couple others, maybe not as many opportunities this year. That's why the free agents,
two potential. Here's how bad the quarterback class is this year. There is a mock draft by a major sports ESPN guy or NFL guy, analyst, who has 3 running backs going in the first round. When's the last time 3 running backs went in the first round? We used to have, it wasn't that long ago, we were having conversations, will any running backs go in the first round? There's so few quarterbacks that they got 3 quarterbacks three running backs in the first round. It's ridiculous. No, you got 2 guys.
Did you see the same one I did, where the Steelers and Chargers picking back to back both took running back?
Yeah, and then the next guy took Travion Henderson.
And then Travion, and then Emeka Ibuka went to Seattle at 25, and I said, "There's no way Ibuka gets past 21 with the Steelers. Yeah, there's no way. There's no way they're going to take running. If they re-sign Jalen Warren or Najee Harris, which Jalen more likely because he's restricted."
Travion Henderson's not a first-round pick.
No,
I love Travion Henderson as a third-round pick, but in a first-round pick, no.
Is Travion even the best running back on the Ohio State roster on that championship team?
It's
debatable, right?
He's a different kind of back, right? He's the one he's the breakaway. He's not to compare him to Saquon, but he's the Saquon of the group, right? He has breakaway speed. Judkins is more of a Najee type back, right? He's more power.
Yeah, Ashton Genty from Boise State was the pick for the Steelers, and then the other top guy whose name is escaping, because running back is not on my bingo card, at least not that early. I mean, to me, that's I didn't want to get into running back, but that's like taking Todd Gurley, maybe, or what's his name in Indianapolis, guys with a lot of high mileage to them. So, and then come into the pros and then end up injury prone or something. I don't know. I'm not. Yeah. I feel like there's so many teams that get a lot of mileage. I mean, Jalen Warren was undrafted. We'll leave it at that. But yeah, with the quarterback situation, like Sanders is already gone, like top 10. Cam Ward out of Miami is already gone. And then you see names like Jackson Dart or Quinn Ewers or Jalen Milrose, one where everybody wants to make him the next Jalen Hurts, and Jalen Hurts wasn't Jalen Hurts. And I don't think Milroe is going to be Hurts. Milroe to me just doesn't project to be an NFL starter. I know he's got I just don't think he was good in college. Maybe it's somebody that develops.
Think about last season. Was there anybody lighting it up that you were like, that's the dude? That's the dude. Everybody's going to be after dude.
There's nobody that's you look in the legacy of the last, 25 years. There's not like a Peyton Manning. There's not like a Andrew Luck coming out. There's not a Joe Burrow coming out, even Trevor Lawrence. There isn't somebody like that in this class. Arguably, there really wasn't last season either, but you had a number of super seniors due to the COVID rules and everything. So, Quinn Ewers that I mentioned, Riley Leonard. I love seeing these names because Riley Leonard's a guy to me. He could fall he could go undrafted. It reminds you of we were talking about Matt Corral a few years ago or somebody like that. Will Howard
in the 4th.
Will
Howard in the 4th. That's what I'm doing. Will Howard in the 4th.
Dylan Gabriel. But where does that get you? He's not going to start week 1 for the Steelers. He's probably not going to start at all next season. And they're still going to this is a bridge year by all means, whether they take a developmental quarterback or not. How many guys get drafted middle round and end up? I don't want to hear Tom Brady. I don't want to hear Brock Purdy. Dak Prescott probably should have gotten drafted a little sooner, but Jerry Jones is willing to forego all the stuff that's out there in the media or whatever and take chances on guys. Randy Gregory was one of those guys, right? And that didn't work out, but Dak Prescott, that just ended up being a lot of smoke and mirrors and whatever, but very few. You might get a second rounder that's a serviceable guy, but most of the time your elite players Lamar Jackson's the bottom of the first round, okay? Almost everybody's got to be a top 10, top 5 pick. And it's because of how these teams are tripping and falling over each other in order to get that surefire guy that's going to be the face of this franchise for 15 plus years. And there just isn't one of those guys on this list, I think.
It has to do more, and I'm just telling you, like, you look at the exceptions to the rule, right? And those guys tend to fit a system that works, right? The team builds the system around those guys, or they fit within the system that that team has, and they just work. You know, Tom Brady goes to a different team. Is Tom Brady Tom Brady? Maybe not, right? He just happened to be in a system that fit what he could do. Bill Belichick and the offensive coordinators at the time that he was working there knew how to get the most out of him, and he excelled within that system. You know, but he goes someplace else. Does he even ever start? You never know, right? So you don't know, like, and that's why I say Will Howard in the fourth. You don't know. Will Howard showed some signs, right? Is he an ideal candidate for the NFL? Hell no. You know, he makes some bad decisions. He doesn't always read the field well. He misses guys that are wide open. But on the plus side, he's got a little bit of juice in his legs. He's a little elusive, and he's got a decent arm. Not the best, but decent, right? Maybe you catch fire with one of these guys, but that's what it is. You catch fire. You get lucky, right? The point you're trying to make is, yeah, if you're really looking for the pedigree guys, they're top 10 guys, and they very rarely slide out of that. It's just, and there's nothing. This is not the year. This is like worse than the Kenny Pickett year.
Well, and that's precisely like we're already here. This is where your stop is. You are here on this ride. Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett. You know, you've already had Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, Mason Rudolph. You've had the guy that was on your roster for a little while that you took in the middle rounds, tried to develop, didn't turn into a franchise quarterback. You had a guy you took with your top pick, top of the class. It's like, wow, that would have been awesome if it worked out. Didn't work out, because that's the way a lot of this stuff plays out. You got a guy, number 2 overall, and then number 7 overall, 2 former Bears. It didn't work for the Bears. Probably not working for the Steelers either. And then Russell Wilson, who's been around forever, and he's one of the few examples of a middle round guy that's done better. And he was because he did what he did, and you know, at a much younger age, albeit, it gave some new, what do you want to say, life to smaller quarterbacks. And we're finding out that Russ is also an exception to the rule, like Drew Brees was when it comes to the smaller quarterbacks in the NFL. So I will say this much about Will Howard. And I know we're Buckeyes homers here. And he had 4 years with Kansas State and 1 year with the Buckeyes last year, and an explosive ass offense, right? He did throw for 24 touchdowns at Kansas State in 2023, but the dude has 50 games in college over 5 years. That's the kind of stuff you want to see. You don't want these guys that have like 24 collegiate starts and then you try and trot them out there, right? That's usually the kiss of death when it comes to your college quarterbacks, is when they don't have the experience. You've got 3 years of Cam Ward with 38 games, but he's thrown 3,000, 3,200 yards, 3,700 yards, 4,300 yards, 39 touchdowns last year. However, Kenny Pickett was an older guy coming out, right? 5 years at Pitt, and he had broken Marino's record. He had 4,300 yards, 42 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. It was almost like one of those things where the mistakes of my forefathers, and everyone's sitting at the draft table, Rooney's sitting there, and they're like, we don't want to make the Dan Marino mistake of the early 80s with the draft. What, the 82 draft? Was that 82, 84 maybe? It was somewhere there, because then Malone went to the AFC title game and lost to Marino, right? So funny how that works out. They already had a guy. Malone was a first round pick, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So, and they've invested in people. And it's like, well, this is the guy that we hitched our saddles to. Let's go defense. It didn't work out with Gabe Rivera. So there's just, we talk about this. We'll have another show probably at some point. We relook at all of, Kenny Pickett's, much like the Bills. Buffalo Bills for years went through all of this too. They took EJ Manuel. He was the only guy in the first round of his draft class. Feel bad for him. Didn't work out. And, he got maybe another cup of coffee somewhere else and then done. But one thing I do want to do, Brian. Well, go ahead, Brian. You got some more thoughts on the college.
You're too kind. That's all I'm going to say. You're too kind. You feel bad for all these people. I don't feel bad for any of them. They got a chance to play in the NFL, and so great. They made more money than I'm going to make in my lifetime in a few years. Great. I don't feel bad for any of them.
Well, you know what? It depends. Like if you're a first round pick, yeah. I mean, Brock Purdy. I don't know, man. You make like 600.
Oh, he's going to get
600,000. He will now. But let's just say he never got a chance to play. And it's like, okay, you got in the NFL. Nobody remembers who you are because you're, Mr. Irrelevant. And then he makes, 6 figures for a couple years. And hopefully you're wise with that money and don't piss it all away. Or else then it doesn't mean a hill of beans if he made more than me or you because he was irresponsible with it. You see that so many times. I think it's a little bit of a fallacy. Yeah, it's a fallacy sometimes. Not everybody's making that Aaron Rodgers money. You know what I mean? So
of course not.
Don't have a yacht. They're not on a boat like Odell Beckham Jr. And
I mean, the bottom line is, you don't, colleges are not breeding NFL quarterbacks anymore, right? So, when you find one that you can make work and fit and put into the system or build around, you go for it. They thought that was the case with Kenny Pickett, and it didn't turn out to be, whether it was because he was a whiny little you-know-what and didn't want to compete, or whether none of that's true, and he just, they just soured on him. He never really played that well, right? I mean, he had those moments where you were kind of going, wow, that feels kind of cool, kind of magical. He got us on a comeback. But, at the same time, I remember saying this at the time, 3/4 of El Stinko for 1/4 of pretty good is not going to balance out in the long run.
Yeah, and unfortunate that was a lot of the case. And you never know if he ever grows into anything else. But there's such a thin line of patience, when it comes to the NFL. Coach doesn't do well, he's usually gone, and I know that's what people think. Oh, and you just recycle and get somebody new, and hopefully you catch lightning in a bottle and get lucky. But there's teams that haven't even played in the Super Bowl that have yet to capture that same kind of
Cleveland.
Anything. Yep. And you've tried everything too. Talk about the quarterback carousel there and not having a franchise guy really since Barney Kosar. So we've seen the jersey with the names that go right down, all the way. By the way, Deshaun Watson is not on the table for the Steelers. Don't even bring it up.
Oh, really? Somebody brought that up?
I've seen it in passing. I wish I could just, bro.
I feel dumber having heard that.
The things I see sometimes, just running the social media stuff for SU is incredible. Some of the stuff that people send through comments and messages and DMs and hate mail and texts and everything else that we get. Let's go through, because apparently no one's off limits, but we could say some teams are. I'm going to go through division by division. I'm going to start with the NFC and the NFC East, which has the champion Eagles. Jalen Hurts, no. And even so, they're still, I got to repeat this in case people hadn't tuned into a prior episode. Jalen Hurts goes to
Disneyland. He's in Disneyland. He's not
if Jalen Hurts goes to the Steelers and he's behind Ben Roethlisberger, he doesn't play. He probably doesn't have the same career trajectory. Who knows if he's even on this roster right now? A lot of it's the opportunity, the timing, everything else. So when they have it settled, they took Saquon and turned to a running football team so Hurts doesn't lead the league in interceptions this year. And it worked out. It paid dividends. They also have had some kick-ass defensive drafts. So if you say defense doesn't win games, I dare you to turn on that Super Bowl and say something otherwise, especially, man.
Absolutely.
And I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, and it was like, Quinyon Mitchell, he's a MAC guy out of Toledo, right? That's why he falls where he does. And then let's just look at that. Oh, man. And Cooper DeJean. And DeJean, he was injured at Iowa and coming out, and how all this just falls into place for the damn Eagles, and they're able to take those risks. They had the good base. Hopefully the Steelers can have that. Hopefully they have a foundation like this. Maybe you get a serviceable quarterback. But I don't think you're going to find it on any of these other NFL rosters. So Cowboys, Dak Prescott's not going to be available. There's nobody to call there. And the hypothetical,
and you don't want Cooper Rush. So
yeah, it's the same hypothetical as this Trevor Lawrence thing. Omar Khan's going to pick up the phone. Who's available? The Giants, we already know they're looking for one. We talked about Daniel Jones. The Eagles, no, not bringing Pickett back either. The Commanders
Come on, Jaden Daniels, he stunk. He's overrated. He'll be traded. Sure, we can get him for a song. No.
Well, there is the argument that who knew Jaden Daniels was going to be Jaden Daniels coming out of college, but I just don't see
what pick was he? Remind me again.
Hold on, I will let you know. He was in the first round, as was
absolutely he was.
Everybody. Second overall, right? Yeah, that's right.
There you go. That's my
Why
point.
am I drawing a blank on that? It was the question.
I don't know. That's why I was going to let you struggle with it.
Yeah, you know what? Sometimes, man, the coffee doesn't kick in early enough for me. But yeah, a lot of this forgetful. Like Caleb Williams isn't a memorable draft pick for me. Could he be a guy? He's meant to be because he's top overall. Drake May. Was Drake May a reach? He made the Pro Bowl. He's got a really bad roster. I mean,
so did I, by the way.
Yeah, apparently everybody that you know.
I got called in. You know, nobody wanted to show up. I decided to pass, though. I politely did not take the invitation.
Brian was too busy for the Pro Bowl.
Couldn't do the Pro Bowl.
Couldn't do the Pro Bowl. Shame. Yeah. So now we're into the North, and we've had a number of phone calls with the Bears over. As though I was working in the front office, but me and you have talked about the Bears. Omar Khan and the Steelers are the ones making that phone call, and the Bears are just not answering anymore, I don't think.
Yeah.
Detroit Lions, Jared Goff.
No.
But he's been serviceable. What I'm saying is like I'll make some.
But they're not trading him.
Quarterbacks. He's not going anywhere. There's nobody there.
Yeah.
Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love.
No,
nothing going there. I'm not even sold that he's the right move, but they're winning some games. Vikings have an interesting. We have arrived here on the ride too, where the Minnesota Vikings a few years ago had Sam Bradford, they had Teddy Bridgewater, and those guys get hurt, and then they had Case Keenum, and they are a bad call away from progressing possibly to the Super Bowl. And then all of a sudden, none of those three guys come back the next year, and they bring in Kirk Cousins and give him one of the largest contracts a free agent quarterback has ever received. I think 3 years, $96 million, and then they extend them after that, and it still hadn't paid off. Now they have a coaching change. They draft J.J. McCarthy. Sam Darnold was a 1 year. Let's maybe he starts, and then McCarthy eases in, and holy cow, we won 14 games, and one and done. But now you see the thing with Darnold, a guy that was number 3 overall. It was him and Mayfield, number 2 overall, number 3.
Yeah,
somewhere in there. And how many teams he's played on. And I don't look at Sam Darnold. They're talking about whether they're going to franchise tag Sam Darnold in Minnesota to begin with and what kind of money he might command. And I got to remind people of Justin Jefferson and Addison and all these guys that are there that are in Hawkinson that are catching the football for this guy. Do they risk it and put McCarthy in there? And we were talking about Daniel Jones just being there, but he was there because they needed somebody behind Darnold in case Darnold got hurt. So his likelihood of returning there is probably nil. Jones is going to try and get a second chance somewhere, maybe. Somebody will offer it up. I don't know. But yeah, McCarthy probably isn't going to go anywhere either. They know they got their ace up their sleeve, and they may bring Darnold back and spin the wheels on him. And if he's terrible, yeah, they may have an out in the contract. They just part with the money, and McCarthy slides in there. Maybe he takes the it's the relay race. They hand him the baton, and he goes from there. But who knows? McCarthy could be bad too, and we don't talk about that university up north.
Yeah, we don't do that.
No.
Look, I'll give you this. If Russ signs elsewhere, let's say Russ goes and plays with the Raiders, and Justin signs elsewhere, and Daniel Jones is putting around, and they don't have anybody, maybe Daniel Jones comes in on a 1 year deal for next to nothing because nobody else will take him. That's the scenario where they're going to get a Daniel Jones, is when they fail to get one of the guys they actually want. But they're not getting anybody else from any other team. Like are they getting Geno Smith? No. Are they getting Brock Purdy? No. Are they getting Kyler Murray? No. They're not getting any of those guys.
I'm going through the rest here, right? And some guys not available and whatnot. And just by the way, I had Jaden Daniels still up on my screen. 55 college starts, just to give you an idea of the experience factor. Sam Darnold at USC. 2-year starter, 27 games.
And
And
took
in
a
the
while
Mitch
to get.
Trubisky kind of territory too. If I bring Trubisky up, he was what, a 3-year guy at North Carolina, 34 starts. He had a little bit more, but you want a guy that's got between 40 and 50, games. Some guys will have just a little bit more because they have postseason. Maybe guys that played 5 years didn't come out of college early. So Jaden Daniels, a 5-year guy in college, makes a huge, huge, huge difference. So we could probably blast through some of these a little faster than others. We just trounced Kirk Cousins when it comes to the Falcons, and they have Penix there. So Cousins might be available, but talk about another guy that's overpriced in a statue, probably beyond the statute of limitations of even looking into somebody like that. We'll put it this way: if you thought I didn't like Aaron Rodgers, I'll take Aaron Rodgers 10 out of 10 over Kirk Cousins at this point. So maybe 9 out of 10. Maybe I'll give that one chance to Kirk Cousins. No, not really. Carolina Panthers. Didn't they just re-sign Andy Dalton? They're bringing the old Red Rifle back. Yeah, there was a 2-year deal out there for Dalton. Just got re-signed, but they're still trying to do it with Bryce Young. He's shown, he's flashed here or there. It's still not all the way. It's another guy that was top of his draft. The Saints, Derek Carr. We saw what happened without Carr there. Spencer Rattler. Remember, people were like, you got to go get Spencer Rattler. Got to get Spencer Rattler. He could be the next. Got to be the next big thing. This is a guy the Steelers could develop, and I know the Saints aren't all that and a bag of chips, but still, just shows you. No. How about the Buccaneers with Mayfield? Kyle Trask was drafted 2nd round behind Brady. It is just never slid him into that spot. Somebody there knows something behind the scenes that says, we don't hear that guy's name at all for being a 2nd round pick. So no, we're not knocking. We're not coming looking for any of these guys. And then you mentioned Kyler Murray. I've seen that one float around. Should Steelers maybe inquire? No, he's just another.
He's a little teeny tiny man. No,
he is a younger version of Russell Wilson without any of the accolades and worse accuracy.
And smaller.
He might be smaller. I don't know. You blink and you miss him.
So there's this virtual reality game that I like to play. This walkabout mini golf that I play.
Oh yeah, on the Quest headset. On the Quest, yeah. Great game.
Now they have this mini mode, and I just pretend I'm Kyler Murray, and the ball is like this ginormous, and I'm Kyler Murray, and I'm putting.
I haven't fired up the headset for a while. That's a great game, by the way. I'll give it a plug. I get paid nothing to say so, but maybe I recommended it to you at one time. Maybe I used to play that. Didn't? Oh, it's such an awesome game. It is. It really feels like you're playing in like a miniature golf course. It's awesome. The Rams. Matt Stafford's name comes up a lot. That's why I go through all the teams, because I forgot about him. 3-4 years ago, right as Ben was retiring, you remember my famous words. I'm like, I like Matt Stafford. He's just been saddled with a lot of bad Lions teams and injuries with those teams and himself. And you put this guy on a team, and they did with the Rams, with some weapons, with an offensive-minded coach, and they win a ring. And he came out. He was available a year too soon for the Steelers to have taken a stab at him. He comes with a price tag. He now comes older, expensive, injury history.
Yep.
It's not some
of the options that are out there. I take Matt Stafford over almost all of them, except Russell and Justin, right? And the reason is Russell and Justin are coming with the only cost being money, right? Is Stafford going to be a free agent, or is he going to cost us more than that as a trade guy?
Yeah. I mean, it's another one of these informed or moving on, but it's like Justin Fields was informed, and then no teams were. That's the other thing. I don't know what Fields' market is. Did playing for the Steelers really increase his asking value or whatever now? Like, I don't think that it did. I don't think it changed anything from last year, where teams were unwilling to part with, a day 3 draft pick to acquire him, except for the Steelers after. And I know we went over the semantics of panicking or whatever, but they're just like, it was that knee-jerk reaction of, not even knee-jerk reaction, it was immediacy of Kenny Pickett's he's being a dick, and we got to get rid of him, and we need somebody else. And that's about the best way of explaining it. I liked Matt Stafford, but Matt Stafford's 37. He's not going to run around much more than
And Russ, it's a stopgap. I mean, it's the same thing we're talking about with Cousins. We're talking about with Aaron Rodgers. He's at the end of his career. I like him better than I like either one of those guys. I think he may have more left in the tank than either one of those guys. But let's not kid ourselves. he's your bridge.
Yeah.
And whoever you bring in, you almost hope they stink so that you can actually draft a good quarterback.
That's so funny that you mentioned that, because that's the thought of 2025. Like, I don't want to waste another year of Cam Hayward and TJ Watt and Micah Fitzpatrick, but you almost are like, Tomlin needs a losing season, so these guys are somewhere with, and everybody's like tank, and they're never going to tank. They've got enough. They're not so bad that they're going to win only 4 games unless there's a lot of injuries. Even when they were playing all of those backups in 2019 and had Duck Hodges in there, they still were that close to making the playoffs. And so that almost got us all the way through the NFC. There was just the 49ers and the Seahawks remaining. And unless we want Joshua Dobbs back from the 49ers, there really isn't anything there, or Drew Lock or somebody like that. There's nobody there on those teams that the Steelers should be picking up the phone for either.
Nope, I agree.
I know you agree. And before I jump over to the AFC, on my phone here, Eric Edholm, another one of these NFL draft gurus over NFL.com or whatever, says the Steelers are one of 7 teams for that they're in the running for Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado, Dion's kid. He's another guy where I have his numbers up. Yeah, 4,000 yards, 37 touchdowns. All that stuff is just, wonderful. But he has 24 collegiate starts. I mean, do we really know who somebody like a Shedeur Sanders is? Like, those are the kind of things that like really disturb me about the draft, because we could talk about size or strength or, all of the things that are immeasurables. 6'2", 215. He's not a giant, but he's also not teeny tiny on the quarterback spectrum. But as we go through the AFC, there are some physical specimens that haven't necessarily panned out. I'm going to jump over a little uncharacteristically to one of your favorite guys, Will Levises of the world, because what did the Tennessee Titans do? Is he panned out?
Before you do that, let me just give you my 2 cents on Shedeur Sanders. If he's there at 21, maybe you take a shot. But you don't move up to get him. You don't give up anything to get him. That's it.
I might be okay with that. Would you take him over like one of these top flight receivers? Because you still need somebody to be able to throw the ball to the receivers. Tell me which one of the top flight receivers that we're taking. I don't know, man. I'm in love with Ibuka. I can't lie. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I just don't see him falling that far.
Every draft is Ibuka. It's Ibuka, and what's the little stupid draft day thing that I'll have up eventually? Ibuka, no matter what.
Mock draft insanity. But then on the insanity, you're taking Ibuka like 17 times because you've acquired 80 picks. So, but we'll do that. We might do more than one of those this year.
I'll replace the entire team. Screw it.
And they'll all be up for contract at the same time.
Yeah. But, exactly. We'll be screwed.
Well, Mason Rudolph's new home, where he got to play a little bit, and you had the Callahan. Is it Brian Callahan? I always get him and the dad confused. But the former OC from the Bengals, they got the new coach. He was supposed to develop Levis. They benched him for Rudolph. Nothing looked good there. The whole team kind of stinks. And there was just somebody on social media saying, hey, maybe they should inquire about Will Levis. I'm like, that's like inquiring for Kenny Pickett with bigger hands. Maybe.
I don't want anybody who considers themselves dreamy. I'm out on the Will Levi Strauss. I don't want that used pair of pants. I'm out.
And you look at like the Colts, they went and took Anthony Richardson, athletic guy. He took himself out of a game. like, is he there? Like, is he going to amount to anything? We talked about Trevor Lawrence with Jacksonville, CJ Stroud with the Texans. I mean, the South is pretty well
I'll do that deal in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I know you would. They're not going to. The AFC East, 3 of the 4 teams already really locked up too. I mean, Josh Allen, he's not with Buffalo. He's not going anywhere. They have Trubisky as a backup. Tua Tagovailoa, I'm not going anywhere near. I wouldn't go near Tua. Dolphins made a huge deal with him. Drake May, rookie with the Patriots. Well, now second-year player with the Patriots. Jets have a big undecided, big question mark. A lot of people are like, oh, Justin Fields will go there. It'll be a great fit for them. And it's like, yeah, so they could go and draft somebody else next year, of course, and they'll just keep recycling and trying to find a quarterback for 20 years also. You go to the AFC North, There's nobody in the AFC North that's trade partners, nor would they be, even if there was someone that were available.
Not a shot.
Not even worth wasting breath. Of course, Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson are settled in their positions. The Browns are never settled, but Browns aren't trading the Steelers the number 2 pick. That'd be the craziest thing I'd ever see. It would have to be some like real wild.
It will happen in mock draft insanity.
Yeah, it would.
It will.
I mean, it has to. It has to. It's a given. Unless you get another team to trade with Cleveland, and then they trade with that team trades with the Steelers, so that might work. And then just finally, it's just like the NFC. The reason I did NFC first, there were a few more targets, and it's more likely that an NFC quarterback is going to come over to the AFC if there were a transaction, particularly a trade. You don't want the AFC is not going to send somebody within the same conference usually.
Unlikely.
Denver Broncos got their guy with Bo Nix, I think, at least somebody that they're going to be attached to for the next few seasons. Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, Chargers with Justin Herbert, and then the Raiders have an undecided situation there as well. So there's a few. The AFC, although more settled, also has probably more of the question marks on the quarterback side of the equation than even the NFC has, albeit the Rams. Like, I don't know what the Rams are thinking of doing. They usually give their draft picks away. So are they going to go and like try and land like Kirk Cousins or somebody? Are the Raiders going to try and go after Russell Wilson? That's what people say. There's always all these links. There's always all this speculation and rumors. We've just speculated on all 32 teams, and we've pretty much come to the conclusion. You could take your lottery, your daily lotto numbers, and maybe have a chance at hitting at somebody in the draft. But I wouldn't count on that replacing your day job necessarily in order to put an analogy out there. So the Steelers, would they be in the market for a quarterback? They're going to have to sign somebody else probably to be a backup, and then maybe draft somebody to be developmental. Could it be all 3 new players? Could be. We didn't mention Kyle McCord either out of Syracuse, but he falls like way down the line too on this draft list.
Ibuka in the first, Travion in the third, Will Howard in the fourth. There you go.
I don't know, man. I'm not sold on Travion.
Load him up with Buckeyes, my friend.
It's just I don't know. And I was talking about that too. It's like how many, like Philadelphia is old Georgia, so why not? But Steelers haven't had as much Ohio State flavor recently. There was like a few years there where they were kind of like beating around the bush at guys. Like they got Santonio, and then they brought Cam Hayward in, and a few others. They had like Will Allen, Shazier. So they definitely, Durant Grant, whose most famous play was like a preseason game. But just in closing, it's like bringing back Wilson or Fields isn't necessarily the worst thing. Obviously, I prefer Russell, the experienced veteran. I felt he played better. I can give you all the reasons why. That's a whole show in itself. Fields, I mean, if you're going to live or die with that, so be it. I don't expect anything much more than what we saw with like Kenny Pickett. Maybe just a tinge more. He does use his feet, but it also replaces some of the passing. Maybe he can move the chains a little bit. Maybe if they do that and they don't take a stab at quarterback, maybe they're putting some more players on the field to build a better team. So maybe you find that quarterback in the following year. Just really depends on what these guys are going to cost. And I feel like Wilson and Fields are both going to want like longer term deals. They're going to want like 3 years. What player doesn't? Yeah. They want that security.
That's where you get to. It's like, I know you're partial to Russ. I'm not partial to either one, but I probably lean more Justin than I do Russ. And the reason simply being that if you're going to sign one of those guys to a 3-year deal, I'd kind of rather it was the young guy. And I think, just in my own world, in my own little universe, I think you get Justin cheaper.
You might, but that's like one of the only things I see. 2 things when people like put Fields ahead of Wilson. Actually, I see a couple more. I'll go through them. One of them is people will say, "Well, they were 4-2, and look what they did earlier in the season, and they didn't really give him a chance." Let's pump our brakes. They didn't give Mason Rudolph a chance, and none of you were out there begging for a guy the Steelers had a 1st-round grade on, supposedly, moved up in the draft in the 3rd round to leap over Cincinnati in order to go get. But we're going to do this for Justin Fields. Already has 44 starts. Now, Justin Fields already has an NFL career before coming to Pittsburgh. He has 6 starts, but don't forget, he had 3 preseason games and an entire training camp. He had his audition all the way through, and those last 3 games, they weren't cutting it. And Russ comes in, everything's great until it's not. And there's a variety of reasons for that. That doesn't necessarily sell me on him for the future. But I do feel if there's a guy you're going to ride with, and then over the next 2-3 years, you have an opportunity to ride with this guy and get the heir apparent in, you're probably not going to stink enough to have one of those top picks, or you're going to have the whole team just fall off the wheels to where you're in the basement. That's all fine and dandy. We like winning, right? But when you only you only win just enough. It's not enough to go to a Super Bowl, and it's also how long term, right? Justin's young, but doesn't mean he's the future. You could sign him for 3 years, and he might last just 2. Yeah. He might not even last 1. He might last this year, and then the next 2 relegated to a backup or not even on the team.
Yeah, I'll state the same things I stated before. Neither one of the guys is the future, and you're not winning a Super Bowl with either one of them. I don't believe you're winning a Super Bowl with Russ. I don't believe you're winning a Super Bowl with Justin Fields. I think, if what you're trying to do is figure out how to get to the point where you can get your quarterback, right? You don't have him, and you're not getting him this year. Unless you strike gold in the draft, you're not getting your quarterback this year. And the nuggets that are in the draft look a lot more like fool's gold than real gold. So
always, even the ones that look like gold end up fool's gold. We mentioned Darnold before. Mayfield had to bounce around how many times? Like I said, again, when you got a guy that's the top overall pick, usually even the second pick taken, Trubisky is like a real bad outlier. He's like Ryan Leaf level bad, right? But I mean, Fields was like the 3rd or 4th QB taken in that draft. So I mean, I realistically, if everybody's again not falling over one another, tripping over one another for the most important position in football, then maybe Justin Fields isn't a 1st round pick. But the transactions changed a lot, and that's why we're saying like running back. We're surprised that this mock draft has like 3 of them in the 1st round. We'll table running backs for another day, probably somewhere where we cover defense eventually. So we're up against it here. Time to put a bow on this show. Folks, just be careful of all the, I know even saying fake news or misinformation is a dirty word these days, but it's exactly what it is. It's clickbait, it's engagement bait, it's rage bait. It's out there to try and get you to respond and to look at stuff. And, goodness, please call us out if we do that. I try not to do that. The reels are very much like that because they're such a short format. You can't help but just say what you're trying to say and just get it out real quick. Unlike this show. So we appreciate our 2%ers that are still here at the end as we bounce around everywhere else. Yeah, touche, my friend. So I always cut it over to you when you start to drink because I think that's only fair.
Of course it is. You're secretly just trying to murder me. I get it. You want me to choke on my drink because I have done that to you multiple times in the past.
All the time.
Hey, as we've said, 'tis the season of deceit. 'Tis the season of BS run rampant. Anything you could possibly imagine you're likely to hear. But let's get past the free agent season and we'll have a better clue of where they're going.
Yeah, it's the same thing. My buddy's already starting with fantasy football. He is such a fanatic with it, and he's like, where would you rank these wide receivers for next year? And I'm like, dude, I don't know where something like. Where do you put Malik Neighbors with the Giants? You don't even know who's throwing the ball to him. How can you rank them? It's impossible.
I only pretend to be a Rooney. I don't play that game the right way.
I know, but still the same way. Like, where would you rank George Pickens right now? You can't.
I wouldn't rank him very high, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you don't know who's going to throw him the ball, even if you felt like he was going to put.
I don't even know if I'd be drafting him because I don't know if he's going to be on this team.
And you know what? And that's like wide receiver is definitely a need for the Steelers. We had it on the list last year. The lists are very similar in a lot of ways. Secondary was a bigger, need last year, but quarterback was still there. Wide receiver. The slot corner position, so they're going to be looking at a lot of the same things.
This year, you got to add running back that wasn't on there last year.
Yeah, possibly. I guess we'll see what happens. You don't think it's going. You don't think, but I don't know. You can't say. You don't know until you don't know, right? Well, Cam Hayward wasn't coming back either. So
I can say I always said Cam was coming back. I didn't say Cam
I know
was never
you did,
back.
But remember
I said Cam's coming back.
So it was very, very similar to the click engagement bait misinformation type stuff. Cam had to come out and say, "I'll never play for the Cleveland Browns" a year ago. Yes. Remember that?
I got that shirt that said, "Hey, bro, I ain't going to Cleveland."
Well, Brian, I'm not either, and neither are you. So
no, I'm not.
Take care, my friend. Catch you again next week. Thanks again for joining us. And, everyone else, it's like, I'm at a complete loss. What do you do when there's no football? Somebody said the UFL is coming around, and I'm like, okay, I used to get excited about the spring football, but man, the UFL thing is just fallen so far off the radar for me. I might check out a couple games here, but I'm not very invested in it. So,
you know what I said when people told me about the UFL? I said, man, I really miss football.
That's fair. That's like watching the Pro Bowl, right? They need to get something like hockey's got, so we have some fights. That's what we need. And get these guys that actually care about it. I don't know. Football is just it's a different beast when you get at that level. Nobody wants to get seriously hurt, where hockey's like, it's but the flesh wound. I'll play with it. So the gladiator kind of mentality of football players is kind of thrown out the window anymore. And with the millions of dollars and also concussions and everything else. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But again, topic for another day, my friend. You enjoy the rest of your week. Everyone else, thank you for joining us here on the Steel City Underground podcast. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I still got my coffee in my hand because, I'm starting to lose my voice here. So until next time, cheers, my friend. My name's Joe. His name is Brian. Until next time, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.